What's happening, everybody? Everybody's having a fantastic start to your week. Hopefully this live thing works this time. Looking at you, YouTube. Is it working? Is it on? Are we live? Give this thing a few minutes to spool up. Topic is going to be, should you mod your car? Should you modify your car at all? You know, the thing that got me really kind of mulling this around in my head was, well, you know, the whole thing with the EPA and the RPM Act and everything else. And obviously, I've been in this modern cars thing for quite a while, but let's say you couldn't mod your car. That'd be a real shame. But for some of y'all, that might be a blessing in disguise. I mean, listen, I field all of your questions. There's some of y'all that don't need to be behind the wheel of an automobile, much less the wheel of one making 400, 500, 600 plus horsepower. So I kid. Anyway, is modding right for you? Should you modify your car? And what we're talking about in terms of modifications, it could be anything. We're talking primarily engine modification, supercharging, heads, exhaust, things like that. But the more invasive you get, especially with a modern car, the more expensive it gets. The more it'll start to encroach on reliability, fuel economy, resale value. And so those are some things that I wanted to talk about. And this chat is really more for somebody that's just kind of getting into this. You know, they've been watching YouTube videos and they've seen some things. They've been a little bit more of a casual observer, but they want a little bit of a taste, right? You know, they got a buddy, they got a family member that's got some kind of a hot rod, and you know, they like the way that it sounds, they like the feel of the acceleration or whatever, and they want to try to get into this modding thing. So here's the deal. First of all, if you're going to mod your car, start with the most important bits: suspension, tires, the things that actually keep that contraption on the road. That's the most important part of this. Aside from the human being that's going to be driving it, and we're going to get to that in a minute. Right now, we're just talking specifically about modifying the vehicle. Suspension bits and tires are absolutely the most important thing that you can get for your car in terms of safety handling, provided they're installed correctly. But where you really start to run a little bit off the rails is if you build the car from the front of the car to the back of the car. This is where guys get it so wrong. And what ends up happening is they will take a car, perfectly serviceable, I don't know, some kind of an automobile, doesn't matter what it is, some kind of a Camaro, Mustang, Challenger, Charger, doesn't matter. And they see a bunch of dyno videos and they just gots to have that powers, right? So you start seeing them playing around with intakes and exhaust and tunes and intake manifold porting and throttle bodies and everything that they can do to get the thing to make a little bit more power, which is basically what all of that would get you. Just a little bit, right? But it's that little bit, it's that taste. And everything seems to be holding up fine. You haven't strayed too far away from stock power. And the reality is that that's usually where a lot of guys stop. It's kind of like a start and a stop at the same time. We used to call these day two modifications back in the early days of hot rodding. And what that basically meant was if you picked up your car on a Wednesday, typically Friday night, you and your boys sitting around a case of beer, you're going to be putting headers on the car, swapping out intake manifolds, carburetors perhaps, doing some suspension bits or whatever, swapping out wheels and tires. It's the day two type of modifications that we're talking about. You're not really taxing anything, at least not on the engine side and not downstream, again, provided that your tune is accurate. But here's the thing, moving too much further past that, that's when you start to tax the components on the car. You start looking at half shafts being a problem, transmissions being problems. And this is one of the areas where I've done my level best to try to give the best advice that I could extract as much power and as much performance out of mostly stock vehicles. And the reason for that has just been experience. I mean, experience is the absolute best teacher. And Professor Time isn't going to lie to you. One of the things that I've found is most of the time when guys start getting more invasive, in other words, you start really getting into it, it doesn't matter what it is, by the way, it could be LS, SBC, SBF, SBC, it doesn't matter. The minute you start messing around with camshafts and jacking around with, ported cylinder heads and all this other stuff, Hellcats, it's, or any supercharged application, pulleying the thing, it's at about that time that the money that you've invested into that platform, each dollar doesn't buy you as much. Now, you get a lot more power, right? But you start to trade a lot more. Like before, you were kind of getting and not having to sacrifice anything. Now we're talking about cams, heads, lots of money trading hands here. That's one of the sacrifices. You're going to have to paper up. Secondly, if you're trying to put too big of a cam in one of these Mopars, it is going to be a dog. And really that's any engine in general, just driving the thing around on the street. There's believe me, and I'm one of the guys that's done it. Everybody goes, yeah, but the LS guys, I used to be an LS guy. I had a freaking 04 Z06, big ass cam, Veram intake. I did a little bit of work on the intake manifold, a little bit of work on the heads. I used to go sniping, and it was, of course, naturally aspirated, and I would go sniping after Hellcats on the highway just to show them my ass. And the funny thing about that car is under wide open throttle, it was fantastic, but just driving the thing around, it was kind of turtly. And that's one of the things that I try to explain is when we're talking about camshafts. Camshafts is one of the things that comes up all the time with these Mopars. Everybody says, nah, they just don't make as much power as the cams in the LS. Well, the reason why is because they make a lot more power than the LS, typically, displacement for displacement. Now, the Gen 5s are a little bit different on the LS side, but you kind of see where I'm going with this. When you're starting out with basically the same displacement that makes significantly less power, like LT1 versus 6.4 liter, anything is going to help build more power, right? So anyway, getting back to the conversation. It's the drivability trade-off. You start going too big. You can get there a little bit with the small cams, but it's the trade-off that actually ends up being more of a headache. And that's where I was going with this. Me, squirrel. What happens is guys start getting real disenchanted with this. They drive the cars around for a little bit. You'll see them kind of have this real, like a forced smile. They'll tell friends, oh yeah, it runs great, does all this other stuff. Deep down inside, they're wishing they'd have never spent the money. I've seen it happen so often, and I've advised against certain people doing certain modifications so often that it's almost like, okay, I just need to go ahead, cue this thing up, hit play, and just let it do its thing, and so that's kind of what I'm doing here. I'm in essence hitting play and discussing some of the pitfalls that I see guys fall into. And really, you got to ask yourself, are you, first of all, in a spot where you can piss away the amount of money that's going to cost to modify your vehicle? And two, are you willing to trade off, or let me rephrase this question. How much drivability are you willing to trade for a small bump in power somewhere versus a large bump in power somewhere? And why are you doing it? Are you doing it for yourself? Are you trying to run with a pack? Are you spending money that you don't have to impress people that you don't know? That's the other thing. So anyway, coming up on about 9 minutes in, let's check in with everybody, say hello. And then we'll get back into it. Classic Cruise is saying, "Sup, Mason? Sup, Classic?" Mike G is saying, "Howdy, Mason. How's life?" Man, very well. Thank you. Appreciate it. Hope it's going well for you too. Slash is saying, yo, man. Eric saying, "Good evening, Professor B." Good evening, man. Kobe Warren saying, "Sup, B? Got the arm flex. I like it." Mike G saying, should I keep trying to find the Bilstein rear shocks, which seem to be sold out everywhere, or concede defeat and get some KYBs? Don't ever, no, just wait till the Bilsteins come back. If that's what you want, stick with that. Don't compromise there. If you know that that's exactly what you want, stick with exactly what you want. Kobe saying, all I want is a car that runs 10 flat and bad DA. Yeah, I know the feeling. Mike G saying, also, would you recommend the Mopar strut tire brace over a Petty's Garage brace? They're both good. You're not going to get into a bind on either way. I do like the Petty's Garage braces fitment, though. So, for what it's worth. That Mopar is good, too. Anthony's saying, good evening, B. Good evening, Anthony. Kobe Warren saying, I see tons of built cars being sold in, for example, Hellcats and Mustangs. We're going to get to that. Actually, let's go ahead and get to that. So, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, the Green Sheet, okay? All of these, bring a trailer. All of these for sale sites are infested with guys, hot rod, insert brand name. Could be Camaro, could be a Mustang, could be a Mopar, could be a Supra, could be anything. And the reason why is, look, guys will get to a certain point with these cars. And I'll just kind of walk you down. I don't know. You want to talk about Mustangs? You want to talk about Camaros? Talk about Hellcats. Let's talk about Hellcats, because Hellcats are kind of a funny one. They're funny because guys will walk away from Hellcats with hardly anything done to them, but hardly anything done to a Hellcat means it's a freaking mid 9-second car. Like with a Mustang, you've invested in axles and drive shaft and full exhaust, a built transmission, supercharging, tuning, the fuel system to go along with it, big ass injectors. You've invested a lot of money, a whole lot more money than you were prepared to invest in that Mustang. It is not uncommon, by the way, you want to run down a budget? All right, let's walk down a budget, by the way. Since Mustangs are so cheap, let's just roll through what a budget would be if I was putting something together for somebody to actually put a Mustang together that would run with a modified Hellcat and be as durable and as reliable. Because that's the real bottom line here, is that everybody is looking to build that mid 9-second car. That's just how it is. So it breaks down like this. And you get there with all of them in a lot of different ways. Mustang, 30 grand, blower kit, 10 grand. Now you're at 40 grand. You've got fuel system at $2,500. And I'm just going to start adding stuff up. So, and let's say 35 for the Mustang. So you're at 45, 47, 50, including the fuel system. You've got full exhaust. We're going to call that $4,500. Now you're at 50 something thousand dollars. Oh shit, I thought Mustangs were cheap. Now we got 50 grand into this thing. Haven't really even gotten started yet. Oil pump gears, that's another $1,500. You got suspension bits, perhaps, maybe not, but you definitely have axles, which are $1,600. You've got drive shaft, which is going to set you back a G. What I have already, do I need to keep going with this? The cost of admission is exceptionally high to build something that's even remotely reliable. People say, nah, you can do it for way less. Really? Show me one that's been done for way less that doesn't ruin the night of about 300 racers on any given Friday night with good air. I have been over and over and over this. Mustangs fragging transmissions because they're making too much power. It happens to happen a lot. And so these are the reasons why experienced Mustang racers, which I got friends of mine that I'm in awe with how quick they made their Mustangs. But they'll tell you it hasn't been cheap. And the thing is that that's the other side of this. You have to realize that the internet is telling you a bunch of lies when it comes to what is cheap and what isn't. In this day and age, if you want to build a quote unquote fast car, which is in essence to say something that runs 970, 950, 940, somewhere in that range, In other words, a very fast street car, like an exceptionally fast street car, you're going to be shelling out somewhere around $50,000 one way or another. And actually, I'll take it a step further. You're probably looking at more like 50 to 65. And that's leaving out some of the newer cars and the costs of their own costs as well. So, save the whole thing. Well, I built a low 9-second LS truck. Yeah, okay. We're not talking about that. We're talking about sports car, muscle car type stuff. You start getting into the trucks, yeah, I hate to say it, you'd be better off building a truck. They've already got the engine. They've already got the better transmission. They got some heavier duty parts. And believe me when I tell you, you can disassemble a truck down to its component constituent parts a hell of a lot easier than you can a car. So there's a lot of upside. If you want to build something, I don't know, build an LS powered truck, use a cheap turbo, be in good shape, fuel system, the whole nine. But don't be suckered into thinking that this is cheap, because it ain't cheap. I don't care if you've only got $25,000 into a build. That's $25,000. And it had better be in cash, because if you're making payments on something that can blow up at any minute, not a good idea. Let's see what we got in here. Jermaine, thank you very much. Saying thank you for all the knowledge. Man, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you for the contribution to the cause. Let's see. Oh, I just screwed up. This phone's a little bit different. I can't like flick it and scroll, so it takes me a little bit longer sometimes. So anyway, getting back to it, you've got to have the cash on hand, and not just to build the thing, but you've got to have the cash on hand to fix it, not if it breaks, but when it breaks. And there are a select few cars that simply just don't break. Say what you will about the Hellcat. I get it. They're a tank. They're heavy. You can't roll race them. They suck at roll racing. They've got the terminal velocity of a Cessna. I get that. Okay, look. One thing about them, though, they are hell to play with, 0 to 130 miles an hour. Secondly, more importantly, they don't break. When they're stock, you put them on a slick, you send them, and they just don't ever let anybody down. It's rare, at least I should say, when they do. So at least by comparison, and believe me, when you're at the drag strip every weekend that it's open, which by the way, we've had 3 weeks now that we haven't been able to go racing. Tell you what kind of place mentally that puts me. Freaking Jonesing. Anyway, getting back to it. The money part, nobody wants to talk about. The money part, nobody likes to talk about it. But again, when you start getting into the realities of what it takes to build something that is reliable, that's the key thing. And it's probably the most important, well, yeah, that too, but probably the most expensive part of this conversation. See, look, if you build the car from the back to the front, that means you've put axle shafts in it, drive shaft. You built the transmission if it needs to be built. You've gone through and you've looked at suspension bits. You found weak links, or you have identified weak links and you have fixed them. You've got the right person tuning your car that speaks your car's language fluently, whether it's Ford, Chevrolet, Mopar, it doesn't matter. You want to start throwing boost on it after that, that's fine, but that's the last thing that you do. You've got fuel systems that are going to be involved with that build as well. That is the most unsexy way to build a combination ever, but it's the right way to build a combination. Because it saves you a boatload of cash in the long run. I have seen guys build these things from the front to the back. They throw a ton of power at the car, blow the transmission completely up, have somebody that they're trying to tune the thing for cheap, blow the motor up. Tuner's like, look, man, I got no skin in this. This is aftermarket. Racing stuff happens. Because race car, your shit just blew up. And guess what? He's right. It's on you. Do your homework, do your research, build it from the back to the front. Again, I get it. It's not sexy. You cannot put a set of axle shafts on a dyno and brag to your boys about how much power your car is making. But if you don't put those parts on your car, it can leave you stranded or worse. So again, take it from somebody who's been there, done that. This is the right way to go about it. And again, make sure you got the paper to cover not only the build, but the breakage. Because guys, it is gonna happen. It's just a matter of time. Look, there is a reason why I have not gone and pulleyed my car. It's not that I'm worried about blowing it up. It's not that I'm worried about hurting anything from my tuning. But I know from my own experience, data logging, this is the other thing. There are so many things outside of your control that are conspiring to fucking blow your car up. So, perfect example of this, fuel quality. It's not always consistent, and your tank is not always going to be consistent in terms of quality. I have had it happen twice where I had good air, like real good air, and have a tank of fuel be just fine one weekend, and then have that same tank of fuel, half tank, whatever was left in the tank, end up being a problem, throwing all kinds of short-term knock retard into the mix where the thing was flawless the time before taking the car out. So there's a lot to be considered with this. And guys will say, give it all the sauce. Okay. So you give it all the sauce, you get a tank of gas that pisses hot. Next thing you know, you're ventilating your block or at least popping a ringland. It's the fuel quality issue, but you've got a significantly modified car at that point. So, and that's just one of the things that's out there to get you. You know, you've got issues on the street. You've got track prep that can, be a problem. Incorrect tire selection, incorrect tire pressures. We haven't even gotten into the driver mod, which I will eventually get to. But the reality is that there is plenty out there that is conspiring, again, to ruin this experience for you. Make a plan, stick to the plan, and that is going to get you where you need to be with this. And what is it? Was it piss poor planning promotes something, something, something. Anyway, it's all the P's. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And it's absolutely like 100% in the build of something like your own personal hot rod. If you don't have a plan and you don't know where you're going with the build and you're just kind of winging it, that is exactly how guys end up popping motors. That's exactly how guys end up popping transmissions. See it over and over and over again. So have a plan, stick to the plan. More importantly, stick to the recipe. There are build recipes for Mustangs. There's build recipes for Camaros, Mopars. It doesn't matter what it is. Stick to the recipe, follow the recipe step by step in the order that is recommended, and you will have a car that will go down the track like clockwork. Building a truck, you'll have a truck that goes down the track like clockwork once the build is complete, and you're not going to be in a situation where you are endangering components just because you're impatient and want to get out there and see what this thing's all about. Again, seen it happen before. It's over and over again, unfortunately. And it's that impatience is what's driven a lot of guys to just get fed up with the car, fed up with whatever it is that they're working on, get rid of it and move on down the road. And that's where all of those, Craigslist finds. My loss is your gain on Facebook Marketplace or whatever. Anyway, let me catch up with you guys. Like Grid saying, hey, I sold my 2018 TA Plus thinking about what to get next. Tough decisions. A lot of cool stuff out there. Mark saying, feels like it's been years since I caught a light Mason stream. What's up, everybody? What's up, Mark? Brandon saying, I've mentioned before, but I'm doing a stage 1 package with HHP, which I've seen numbers anywhere from high 740s all the way to 790s real horsepower. At what point am I pushing the envelope with a Hellcat? Anything over stock if you're running pump gas. And I say that, yeah, sort of kidding. They're going to throw a ton of fuel at the car, which is fine. More fuel basically will help to make the car actually a little bit safer as well. 740 to 790 on a Mustang dyno is going to be high sixes to like 730-ish. That's fine. Just stay there. Don't try to get any more out of it than that. The car's too heavy, and you are on the absolute ridge of needing to basically having to run butane or Torco or a race gas mix or something like that. They will probably neuter your timing to the point to where you can use pump gasoline. That's kind of where that 740 number comes into play. But the way that it works on my side for Mustang dyno numbers, give you a perfect example of this. Most stock Hellcats on a Mustang dyno, a healthy one will put down 595. Tune it a little bit, you can pick up 40-ish horsepower. I was able to play with my tune, and yeah, Revlon, she runs pretty good, I'll admit. Mile an hour proves that. Revlon put down 666 to the rear wheels on the green screen and put down 662. Is that what I put down? No, you got me one. What the hell number did that all the way down? She put down, yeah, 662 and 604 torque. That's, you can't really see anything. That was her, when it green screened 666. And I mean, guys, I shut the thing down early on the big end. It's still kind of climbing and I'm getting out of it. So, and that's at 6,300 RPM. And again, I'm getting out of it kind of early because I'm not pushing it. And by the way, I'm not pushing that car. Ain't nobody else touching a 1012 at 130, whatever the hell fast mile an hour it was going. You don't have to push them that hard to get the best performance out of them. That's just something else to go over too. And that's, again, stock boost, straight 93 octane. And I mean, she is on a hunt. Look at that. Look how pretty that is. I mean, just absolutely trucking up on even on the top end. Barely starts to kind of nose over. And again, that's just me getting out of it. So, I guess the point here is that it's that magic 700 number, if you will. It's a weird way to put it. It's a really weird way to, anyway, it's that 700 horsepower number where pump gasoline throughout the course of the year, whether it's winter blend, summer blend, it doesn't matter. You run into a situation where the fuel itself will not support any more power. Now, a lot of that has to do with the weight. It's just getting the inertia moving. But between the weight and the cylinder pressures, for this type of a platform, I like to say that 700 to 7.25 is about as much as I like to see on a Mustang dyno. So hopefully that answers your question. That's kind of a around my ass to get to my elbow kind of way of answering it. But Junior's saying, got to be wise enough to know when to use the power. Race some 19-year-old on some back roads. He had a Camaro SS. 1 week later, he was racing a Jeep Grand Cherokee on a busy street. Oh, shit, the Cherokee hit a jaywalker. Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's definitely not something y'all want to be doing. Yeah, time and place. If you're going to be playing with these things, just know time and place, man. Brennan saying, oh yeah, I'll be voiding the warranty. It's a 2020. Oh, and California's got the, yeah, if you're involved, you get popped. I remember that. Tobias checking in with the arm flex. I like it. The RT saying, love the content, brother. Thank you very much. The XO saying, I got a minivan. Actually, one of the more fun vehicles I've ever reviewed is the Pacifica. Funny saying, what's up, Mason? I've learned a plethora of knowledge from your videos. Greatly appreciate you bestowing your experiences and knowledge upon us. I'm happy to. Thank you very much. So saying, first mistake was thinking about buying a Ford in the first place. Actually, Ford's got some pretty good stuff, man. All of them are good nowadays. I love them all. Eric saying, my 2016 Scat Pack has 80,000 miles. Should I mod it? I don't know. It depends. Have you taken care of it in the last 80,000 miles? I've seen a lot of 80,000 mile cars that are cleaner on the inside than a lot of 25,000 mile cars. So it all depends on the health of the vehicle. I can't really answer that question. I would say it's always going to be vehicle specific and situation specific as well. Ken saying the track I go to is very strict. Anything faster than a 10.0 or 135 in the quarter mile, mandatory roll cage drive shaft loop and other safety items. Having a roll cage in a street car sucks. So that the new rule, NHRA anyway, is basically that. 150, you have to have laundry. 135 might be a 6-point. And yeah, anything in the 9s would have to have a cage. The problem with that is that there were some provisions that were put in place. Oh, man, do not get me in a line, because this is where I kind of get a little bit mixed up. But there are, eerily enough, there are quite a few 9-second capable cars out now from the factory, which, obviously that was not unheard of back in the, even 5-10 years ago. So because of that, NHRA has kind of bent the rules quite a bit. And a lot of tracks don't necessarily go per the numbers on those. If late model Hellcats, Mustangs, things like that, if they've got a cage, sometimes they'll let it slide if you don't. But bet your ass, you start clipping close to 150, they're gonna yoink you right off of that track, because that can get them into trouble. Kobe's saying, when a car breaks at the track, it kills a good night of racing. Yeah, for everybody, not just the guy that broke. HU saying the worst thing people do is piecemeal a build. They keep pumping money into something without a plan. If I'm asked to mod a car, I start with a budget and a plan and add at least another 30%. So, it's funny. I've tried walking folks through the process with usually quite a bit of success. When I sit across the table from somebody and I explain to them what it's going to take to get them where they need to be in terms of power, performance, budgeting, and things like that, or when I used to, it was pretty cut and dry. And again, you stick to the recipe. This is what works. I'll be more than happy to field your questions, but this is how we're going to build your vehicle. If I am involved in the build, at least I should say, that's how it always went. Now, I wasn't always involved in builds, and sometimes they didn't go as planned. But I can tell you that when the recipe is followed, the result is always predictable. All of these cars are built basically the same. But I will tell you that these are machines, they're built by human beings. There are times when you get just something on the dyno and it breaks. I've seen stock cars break. I've seen mild LS combinations break for seemingly no good reason. But these breakages do happen. Parts failures happen, and they happen a lot more regularly than you think. And keep in mind, there is no warranty on these parts. There is no warranty on your build. It's ultra rare to find a manufacturer that will say, okay, we will warrant this engine, or we will warrant this particular build. Doesn't really work like that, because as a shop, I can't warrant products that another manufacturer makes. About the only thing I can do is say that the labor will be done the right way. But these parts, if they fail, are these manufacturers are only liable for the part itself. It's very rare when a manufacturer will cover labor costs and things like that. There's too many opportunities for fraud and things like that to come up to try to take advantage of that warranty. So that's why manufacturers just don't. And they'll tell you pretty clearly in their literature, if there is a failure and it's due to their fault, then they'll just replace the part. But labor is all on you. So that's another thing to consider. Don't expect somebody to stand by their work. And, no, they're not going to. And the reason why they're not going to is because it is the nature of the hobby itself. Refunds, unless it is a part that is literally showing up jacked up, are not part of the equation. You can say whatever you want. You can get as butthurt as you like, but there are shops that will stick by their own work. There are shops that will stand behind the work that they put out and actively make sure that you are a happy customer when you leave. But interestingly enough, that doesn't always play into the favor of the shop itself. It's not necessarily the shop's responsibility to make life better in the event of a breakage, for example. Let's say you have a situation come up where you have a shop put an engine in the car, you've got other entities that are involved, machine shops, things like that. And for whatever reason, there's an issue with the build and the thing spins a rod, and what do you do then? A lot of shops will run away from that. They'll say, look, man, we don't know what you're doing with this thing. I don't care what you think you could be able to do with it. Shit happens. Sorry, man. Sucks to be you. I've seen shops do that. I've seen shops go out of their way to try to help the customer. Only to have a bad review or something like that. This shop built this thing and it thing turned into liquid shit on the side of the road one day. Okay, well, what were you doing to make that thing fail? But more to the point, the shop was trying to take care of you. The take care of you part of it, that's the shop trying to be cool. That's not the shop doing the right thing. That's the shop trying to be cool and trying to be understanding. But the right thing for you is not in the best interest of the shop at that point. So again, no warranty on this stuff. Once you void your warranty, you are on your own. And so that is, again, another long-winded way for me to tell you, if this is your daily driver, and I can't stress this enough, get on Facebook get on Facebook Marketplace, get on Craigslist, drive around your local hood, find you a cash pickup truck to buy, something that's not going to cost you more than about $5,000 or $6,000. Buy that thing, pay cash for it, save up, whatever, put it on short-term payments or whatever. Have that to get you back and forth to work. Don't modify extensively. I'm not talking about exhaust and a tune or a couple other BS things like that. I'm talking about if you really want to start move away from heavy petting and starting to get things wet, what you need to do is have reliable transportation. I have cringed so many times, and I've talked guys out of modifying their daily because invariably they modify their daily, they beat the living hell out of this thing, it breaks, and then it's, oh my God, how do I get back and forth to work? And then it's some bullshit sob story. I can't get back to work and then my boss is that. Nobody told you to build the thing. Nobody told you to rag the piss out of it. You've been told that modifying the vehicle is going to affect reliability. reliability monster showed up and bit you on the ass, and you've got no way to get back and forth to work now. What do? You got to buy a cash car anyway. So just do it. Find you an old Camry, find you an old pickup truck, an old beater. By the way, you will fall in love with your beater. You will learn to love your beater, and you'll have names for it. You'll remember every stain and every reason, every French fry that you find in it, every onion ring. You will have memories that you build in that beater that you'll never build in your hot rod that you're all worked up over. You're just all in a lather about. So that's actually one of the benefits to it. But factor that in as part of the cost of doing business when you're looking to modify one of these cars. If you want to build a super fast hot rod, daily driving that thing is going to start to be a major pain in the ass. And again, dealing with fuel quality issues, dealing with whatever reliability type issues, you don't want to have that. So anyway, enough of that. Let me get back to you guys. RT Kid said, hey B, been working on getting my 2010 manual RT 60 foot and I can't get it out of the hole. If I launch it too hard, it smokes the tires. If I launch it too low, it wheel hops. He's got ourselves. He's 19 years old and he's new to racing. So RT Kid, perfect segue into driver mod. First and foremost, you're doing the right thing here because you're out doing it. You're out practicing. This is just like anything else. It's if you want to learn how to play the drums, if you want to learn how to put together a kit, if you are into anything whatsoever, you're into boxing, you're into doing anything, it's practice, 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 and it's practicing proper technique. And what you have to do is you need to be able to have at least 1 or 2 nights a week where you can go out to a place and work on launch. Just work on launching the car. Get a feel for the car. Get an idea for how the thing's going to come out of the hole. Practice, practice, practice. Get you a secondary set of wheels if you have to. Run a better tire on the back of it, like drag radials. Work on getting the thing out of the hole. Work on your launch on the street in an unprepped situation. That's how you get to where you can just roll into the throttle, shower down on it, grab second immediately, and be able to carry that launch, that first, second gear transition like clockwork over and over and over again. I used to bracket race, actually, Foxy, the black Mustang that's sitting in my garage right now with a grenaded clutch. Still haven't fixed that yet, by the way. But I used to bracket race that car, and I wasn't like, I grew up. You have to remember though, I grew up with a granddad that raced stock cars and was teaching me, you got to control the skid on these old oil field roads in an old Dodge pickup truck. Okay. So I've been at it for a while, I guess you could say, just goofing off. But it's getting the car out and just practicing, and know that you're not going to get it right the first 50th or 65th time. You're going to come into it. You'll eventually get the feel. You'll have a feel for holding the car at a certain RPM and looking through the windshield. You're going to have a feel for rolling into the throttle. Here's your clutch, here's your throttle, into the throttle, and feeling the clutch and modulating the acceleration basically with the clutch pedal as you're applying power to keep that RPM steady as you're launching the car out of the hole. All of that takes time. All of that takes practice. And anytime you switch platforms, you've got to re-practice because each platform is a little bit different. So going from a Camaro, Mustang, whatever the case is, Mopars, it doesn't matter. All of them take practice and all of them take a little bit of time. But once you get good at one, you can use that skill set and transition over. But it's, again, practice, 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 and get you a set of tires so that you're not trying to make this happen on a set of street tires. Modern cars, I don't care if it's an RT, Mustang, Camaro, whatever, modern cars are way too powerful to try to do this kind of stuff with a stock tire. I mean, you're talking about 420, 40, 50, 80 horsepower. It doesn't matter. I mean, they're all making a boatload of power. So Again, practice, get you a set of tires, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Also, get involved with SCCA Autocross. This is something else you can do to help develop just a general skill set. It's like anything else. I can show you how to throw a jab. I can show you how to throw a hook, but you've got to be able to incorporate everything into your game plan. Get into SCCA. Do at least one autocross per month. Find you some roads. I'm not saying do this on public roads, but you can play around a little bit. You know what I'm getting at with this. And learn the car, learn the platform, feel how it sets up, especially coming out of corners. Feel how the thing is going to pitch. Learn how to control it. That's going to be one of the more important aspects of learning the platform. It's not just learning how to launch the car, but it's learning how to drive the car out of corners, learning how to set the thing up for turns, picking up apexes. I still, to this day, I do a lot of open track stuff, SCCA, all of that. I will still, while I'm driving, I'll still pick up apexes. Yeah, I'm just, as I'm driving, I'll just pick up apexes, windy roads or whatever. It's just something that'll get into your head and you just start doing it naturally. So anyway, driver mod, most important modification you can make to the car, and you do that with the carbone stock. Eric saying it's not smart to mod a car with high mileage. The thing is define high mileage. I mean, again, it depends on how the vehicle was used, how it was maintained. Look, I've seen vehicle, like my work truck is impeccably maintained. It gets oil changes every 5,000 to 6,000 miles. I wouldn't have a problem throwing a blower on that thing. Runs great, but if it's been poorly maintained, a 50, 60,000 mile engine could be way worse than a high mileage. Again, it's very dependent on the situation. And Mr. Black Tie is saying, I think you meant if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. Absolutely. Yeah, one of the, I forget what it is I forget, it's piss poor planning promotes something. Anyway, I can't remember it. I used to know it off the top of my head. Now I can't think of it. Dr. Doe saying, story of my life, make my car fast. Okay, it's going to cost X number. Well, we can do it for less X's. Nope, we can't, because then your shit blows up and it gets put on me. Yep. Seems like anytime my shop tries to do a customer a favor or get them back out racing per them begging for it, and we did it, they say they end up bad-mouthing us. It's not our fault. We warn them, we won't now. Yeah, and that's the thing, you can't. Again, the whole issue that you run into is they're the ones that blew it up, right? I mean, again, this is stuff we used to see. Oh, we got to get the thing back out. Okay, well, to do it right, this is what it's going to take. And a lot of times, the other thing is make sure that you're working with the right clientele and have the discussion with them. They need to know what they're up against. They need to know what can happen. You're not putting it out into the universe for it to happen. You're just saying, look, these are things that can happen along the way. You're walking them through the forest, okay? Yeah, the big bad wolf is out there, but doesn't mean big bad wolf's going to show up and bite your ass off. It just means that, look, be prepared. Understand the risks of the activities that you're about to find yourself involved in. The story is saying, salute, Professor Mason. I like it. David saying, have you tuned a Holly Sniper on a normally aspirated Scat? No, not at all. Wouldn't have a reason to. I'd be using the HP tuners on the stock operating system. Randy saying, good evening, Mason from Middle Tennessee. Nice. Sorry, brother. Late to the live show. Very cool. Love Tennessee. Absolutely love Tennessee. I used to go to Johnson City a couple of times a year, man. I love Tennessee. White Knuckles saying, what up, B? Any idea where I can get non-MDI lifter yoke? My understanding is the non-MDF lifters won't fit in the MDS side of the yoke. Is this correct? So the Mopar Performance made a kit that had the plugs and the lifters. And MMX also sells the kit. As far as how that all works, Dr. Diff can probably answer that question better than I can. I never messed with the kit. I never messed with any of that. If the heads were coming off of any of the Hemis, it was getting a camshaft. It was not going to get an MDS delete kit at that point. There's really no sense in it. If you're getting that invasive into the engine with the heads off of the thing, you're going to be putting a cam in it. Steven's asking, can a stock 6.1 fuel pump handle E85 with Hellcat injectors? Thanks in advance. I believe it will, yes. I know the ones for the 6.4s do. Most of the time, the guys with the 6.1s don't mess with E85. There's just nothing in it for them. At that point, you're not working with enough compression. There's just not enough power gain because you're not starting with an aggressive enough combination to take advantage of the E85. So if you've got a very healthily built 6.1, I would say you're probably on the right track. But if you don't worry about the E85 thing. Let's see. Donald's saying, let's see. Should I modify my ride? I'm 70. Can't think of a V8 Mopar I haven't. True that, brother. Miss Blacktop saying, hey, B, thanks for the check. Got the arm flex and the fist bump. I keep hearing people on the net say they are going to mod up their cars to try to beat an EV like a Mach-E Mustang performance package. What's that about? So here's the thing. The Mach-E with the supercalifragilistic mode, whatever that is, the top of the line mode, these EVs are unbelievably quick out of the hole. Like there is nothing that you've ever driven or ridden in that will prepare you for what an EV really does run like. Like if you've ever ridden in, let me think about this there's nothing out there. Just the way that they accelerate from 0 to 100 miles per hour is like, it will redefine your idea of what fast is. Now, after 100 miles an hour, unless it's like a Taycan or an e-tron, which has a 2-speed for the higher end models, the vehicle will start to kind of nose over a little bit. It's basically because the motor is getting outside of its efficiency range. It's like running out of RPM. It's exactly what it is, just like any engine. So most of them will be strong as hell to 120, but it's the 0 to 100 miles an hour that really gets your attention. And so it's trying to modify cars to hang with those cars in that 0 to 80, 0 to 100 mile an hour range. That's what they're trying to hang on to with those. Doc saying there can't be a warranty on high performance parts. They don't warrant it for me. Why should I have to pay for it? Usually it's user error. Yeah, and again, real talk from a shop owner, guys. I mean, look, when you're dealing with these types of products and these types of vehicles, they're not babied, all right? And look, manufacturers have to put a protocol together. They have to put a product out there, and it's got to handle the parameters of use, misuse, and abuse. Abuse is not covered by warranty. Misuse is questionable and discretionary. Typical normal, what is considered to be, or what would be considered normal use, is warrantable. Any performance part is designed to work in the misuse and abuse area of what would be considered a warranty protocol. That's why it's not warrantable. It's not warrantable not because it is not fit for use. It's simply not going to be, it might last longer, but it is not suitable for misuse or abuse. And it lends itself to abuse and that's why it's non-warrantable. Hang on just a second. Brendan, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Asking, do you recommend that I use an additive such as butane when I go to the track to ensure that I have a good tank of gas? Couple of ways for me to answer that. One, if you are boosted and you're working in a situation where you have very low DA or it's very hot outside, moving forward for my car, I'll be running a little bit of butane. I've already proven that I don't need to, but it's just a little bit of insurance. It's not going to make a bad tank of gas good though. And this is something that I need to stress to you. A bad tank of gas is a bad tank of gas, regardless of what additives you put into it, aside from adding a good tank of gas to it. In other words, if you had access to Sunoco GT260, which is just like it's 100 octane race fuel. And in your data log, you saw where you were getting short-term knock retard where you really shouldn't get it, or if you're seeing voltages kind of move around a lot, you're going from like a volt to 2.5 volts to a volt or something like that, where it's questionable if it's just extra noise or is it really knock, you might add a couple of gallons of that race gas to see if it shuts it up a little bit. Shut it up meaning you chill the knock sensors out. The issue with that is that's number one, incredibly expensive, and two, it's kind of labor intensive to have to go through and look at all the data logs and go through the mental gymnastics of, okay, if I pay $20 for this extra fuel, am I really going to need it? Is it really bad fuel, or what's the case? What's the deal? What do I normally see out of the car? And this is where having that savings account, if you will, of previous knowledge of data logs. Like I've got so many data logs wrapped up in my head. Like I'll look at a data stream and I'm just going, works good. Or I'm looking at a data stream and I'm going, why? Why is there even knock retard? The voltage is not anywhere near knock retard time to pull it to die. You just freak out, right? Anyway, it sometimes work against you. The butane and the Torco and the race gas in a naturally aspirated car can actually end up working a little bit against you if you get too aggressive with it, just because you will over octane the car. You got to remember that the stuff that you're putting in the tank with butane is not generating BTUs, if you will. It doesn't generate explosive power. It's an additive that's put into the fuel to help control knock. But it's not an explosive component of the fuel, if you will. So if, like, say, for example, I got this Pepsi bottle here. If this empty area is filled up full of Pepsi, then I'm 100% Pepsi, right? But if this empty area right here is something that controls the pre-detonation profile, if you will, of this Pepsi, but the Pepsi is what actually creates the heat and creates the explosion, then I've now reduced my BTUs in my cylinder by this much. And that's what ends up happening. You can just over octane in this case. It doesn't mean it burns slower or anything like that. Gas burns at the same rate regardless of the octane rating. But you just reduced the amount of energy that was in that particular payload of fuel, if you will. So use it sparingly is the point that I'm getting to. Frederick's saying, always delivering knowledge. Man, I appreciate the kind words, guys. I really do. Thank you very much. Just trying to help out where I can, fellas. Let's see. Cody's saying, building a Honda Civic is a good starting point. Lots of aftermarket parts, and it can be crazy fast for how light it is. Yeah, that's true. But they work a hell of a lot better as a cash car. Boosted him, he's saying, my Hellcat is my cash car. Yeah. Cody's saying, yeah, another good piece of advice, learn your car stock. What's funny, I'll tell you this, guys. This is... Again, one of the reasons why I haven't boosted up the Revlon. That's a weird way to put that statement. I haven't put pulleys on my car. The reason why I haven't is everybody had said that running low tens was impossible with stock boost on 93 octane. Gotta be pulleyed. No way. You're going to hit a brick wall somewhere in the 1020s and you'll never go quicker than that. All right, so I went out and ran 10 teens. And again, 309 gear, so, all credit to that. But a little bit of tuning, a little bit of trans tuning, and the car in flat DA, in 0 DA, ran a 1019, but the real number is really more like a 1022, 1025. The car is a solid 1020 car. In 0 DA and in real good DA, it'll get into the teens pretty predictably. A little bit more predictably now, the way that the car is set up. So, yeah, I've been out there doing it like clockwork. Well, the interesting thing about that is I've run away from pulleyed cars. I piss off red eye owners with this thing. And it's been a lot of fun. And the reason why I've been able to do that is because I've been playing around with these things for a lot of years now. Consistently, I should say. And it's not my first rodeo. I've had a lot of really fast cars. So that helps. The experience behind me helps. But it's nothing that you yourself couldn't do. Believe me, if I can do it, I guarantee you can do it. So it's just, again, it comes down to practice, experience, and just the want to get out there and do these things. But I wanted to prove it. I wanted to make a statement with my car that a stock boost Hellcat can hold its own against a lot of other cars that it shouldn't, provided you take just the right steps in just the right way. Here it is, a couple of years into it, and got a lot of people wondering if I'm cheating with, a 50 shot, or if I had a pulley on it, or if I did something else to the car. It's like, no. Any given Friday, if the track is open, you are more than welcome to come by and take a peek under the hood of that car. You won't find anything interesting other than stock airbox, stock filter. That filter, by the way, has got about 10,000 miles on it. No, I'm sorry, it had about 5,000 miles on it, because I recently changed. Well, I'd say recently. I changed it out a while back. A gear. That's it. Stock catalytic converters, too. So she's mean and she's green. Funny's asking, is it common to run radial tires on the front, or is it only on back with a different set of tires on the front? Well, you're talking about drag radials. No, you wouldn't run them up front. The 1320s come with, and the Demons and maybe the Super Stocks come with the drag radials front and rear. Absolutely not needed for the front whatsoever. A regular radial street tire is perfectly fine. I run, you're gonna love this. So for my street setup, my fronts, a Turo AZ850s, baby. I did a review on those tires, guys. It's been about 3 or 4 years ago. And man, they're really not bad tires. I happen to have a set laying around and I needed some front tires. By the way, guys, check your fronts on these Mopars. That negative camber does have a tendency to eat the inside portion of the tire. It's just a natural function of how the suspension is set up on those cars. Just keep your eyes on that. Make sure you're not showing cords. Let's see. Ken saying, glad you mentioned bracket racing. Fell in love with it. A few ways to win, 1,000 ways to lose. Better believe that. Oh, Sean saying, what's up, everybody? I threw a tune on my daily driver all-wheel drive EcoBoost Ford Escape, but that's the most I'll do to a daily driver, and that was an easy mod. Yeah, something light. When I'm saying don't mod your daily, I'm not saying don't put exhaust on it. If you want to hear that thing rumbling, put an exhaust on it. That does not affect reliability. Minor tunes, if you did like a trans tune or some minor tune that's, not a set to kill tune, I maybe even see that as being an option. But if you start getting real invasive with your daily, that's when things can go drastically wrong. And Brendan and Frederick, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. Oh, Dave's saying the Holly Sniper I'm talking about is the manifold on HP tuners. No. Oh, F, thank you very much. Guys, one of those things, don't you hate it when something's on the tip of your tongue? Piss poor playing promotes piss poor performance. That's correct. So, no, not the Sniper. The reason why not the Sniper is because I advise against that manifold almost militantly. Unless you are looking to build a significant stroker, 440 cubic inch, even a 426 won't be able to really work that well. At some point, you got to break over, right? So if you've got a big inch stroker, if you've got a cam with a real tight lobe separation angle, we're talking 107, 110 for the Hemi, something that doesn't want to force it to rev out the way that something like on a 113 or a 115 would try to do. In that case, you can make a case for the intake, but here's the problem. It's never going to be ideal because it's not going to promote torque down low, which is what you're going to need to get one of these cars or trucks or whatever out of the hole. So what does that mean? It means you need converter, because you're going to be running this big ass cam anyway. You're going to need converter and you're going to need gearing. Now, let's go back to the statement I just made. Why would I say you're going to be running a big ass cam anyway? If you're running that Sniper, which has runner lengths of about this long, all right, they're like maybe 6 inches long, right? Versus, the foot long or 14 or whatever long inches that you would, once you uncoil one of the runners for the normal Hemi manifold, stock manifolds, there is a vastly different power curve that you're going to see out of both of those intakes. They're going to cross probably somewhere around 5,500, 6,000 RPM. So for many guys, it's already outside of their power band anyway, their usable power band. And that manifold is going to want to turn, it's going to want to turn to like 73, 7,500 RPM, if not higher, based on the cam and, of course, compression ratio, everything else that you're putting together for that thing. So, I'll put it to like this. If you're tuning on HP tuners, your VE table is going to be way lower down low. It won't even be recognizable until probably about 5,000 RPM. And then from there, it's going to be kind of hit or miss. Like I say, I haven't tuned with one. And the reason why I tell guys, look, man, more power to you if you're going to run it. And it might work out well for a guy that's, again, a big inch stroker that's going to be able to promote significant port velocity with it at, say, 4,500, 5,500 RPM. Supercharged application, I would actually, I would hate to run a centrifugal supercharger with that manifold because, they would want to stretch power out to about 8,000 RPM. It might work pretty good for nitrous. Again, nitrous displaces incoming air anyway and makes the manifold act like it's got longer runners. So, if you're hitting it with a couple of kits, 250 shot type setups or, 200 shot or above, maybe it'll work nice. And then turbo would be the other application. Now, turbo, I can see why you would look at it for turbo. You'd be able to build some pretty significant mid-range power with it and then just carry it out the back, but it's going to be laggy. And again, you'd really want to run a cam that's got a super tight LSA to keep the RPM in check. So, you got to remember, you're working with a set of cylinder heads that identify as a set of big block race cylinder heads. They flow 330 plus CFM. The 5.7 will flow somewhere around 315. The 6.4s and the Hellcats flow around 340. So just shoot a number in the middle and you'll be pretty accurate. 320-ish, say 3.25. One of the import guys out there playing around. So just know that coming into the conversation, you are now in the realm of full frontal compromise when it comes to, will the combination work down low in drivability, partial throttle, tip in, throttle response, all of that is going to be secondary to wide open throttle, power production, 4,000 RPM on up, and really I would say 4,500 RPM on up if you've done it right. Hopefully that helps. BB's checking in saying, hey B, what are your thoughts on how my 6.1 will respond to this cam? 218, 226, 112, 112? 112? Damn, Mason, perform. Okay, 112 lobe separation. Got a little bit ahead of myself there. All right, so I don't know what your intake center line is. If you're on a 112, I'm going to guess that with a 218 duration, it's going to be installed about 4 to 5 degrees advanced, which in cam talk means that your intake center line will be at about 108, maybe even 107. So that's actually a fun little cam. You've got a lot of exhaust duration. If you've got long, you're going to have long tubes for that. But it'll be a happy little car. On a 112, it'll sound pretty good. It'll have a nice little kick at about 35 to 3,700 RPM. And it'll nose over at about, 218, 226 on a 112. If your intake center line, let's say it's 112 plus 3, which puts it at a 109. If you're on a 109, I would say that cam, I'm sure the lift is somewhere around 570, 580. That cam is going to nose over at about 5,900 to 6,200 RPM, right around in there. It'll be a fun little cam. It'll be punchy. It'll be a fun cam to drive. If it were mine, I would probably err on the side of just me being me, and I'd throw a little bit more cam at it. But that's a good place to start. I mean, it's a good street grind, no doubt about that. And again, that tighter LSA is going to make it punchier through the rev range, the mid part of the rev range. Awesome question, though. Thank you very much. Kobe's asking, can you data log a locked PCM? Oh, absolutely. No, that's how you get your initial data on any vehicle, is you just data log it. So yeah, as long as you've got your the PIDs in your config file set up the way that you want your config file set up, then yeah. Oh yeah, I used to do it all the time. Kurt's saying Sunoco's popular GT260 Plus contains 13% alcohol. That is correct. 260 GT contains 10% ethanol. The big difference here is that, and you say, well, that sounds a lot like pump gas. That's right, it is. Very similar to pump gas. However, instead of using a lower octane base gasoline, like an 86, 85, or 87 octane, it'll use a 90, 91, or 93 octane as its base gasoline octane. KDC saying, I hear y'all modding your daily. That's why I'm staying NA 345 on my 14 RT. And that's it. And trusting a shop that does majority Hemis. I got a hell of my daily in my day one stock 2 Gen 2 LT4. Nice. I like it. Cody saying a Charger Hellcat from a roll will upset a lot of people. It really will. No, it's not to say that the Chargers are slow from a roll, but you got to remember that for the amount of power that it makes versus, I don't know, just pick anything, a vet, for example. It's not like the vet is going to win the race, but it's going to be in the race. And that's the spooky part of it is, you've got cars like the vet or the Mustang or a lot of other cars stock for stock or slightly modified, that will be right there with the Hellcat or faster. And again, these are modified cars versus stock cars. So already not a good comparison, but I think that the general understanding is that when you're talking about, what cars do well and what their wheelhouse is, something with the drag coefficient, of a barn and, basically weighs almost as much. I'm talking about the barn. You kind of get the idea really of where that's going. But yeah, no, they're not slow by any stretch of imagination. Funny saying, thank you so much for the info. Oh, happy to help. Hopefully I'm helping. Cody saying, if I'm doing a tune in general, it'll be set to kill, aka wheel spin like nobody's business and send my entire drivetrain into the atmosphere. Yeah, I know I put some of those together. Sovereign saying, what's up, B? What's up, Sovereign? And then Sovereign saying, hit that like button. Yeah, hit the like button. Helps out a ton, guys. The algorithm thing, the way YouTube works, they love the likes. So, all right. So getting back into the chat, we talked about the driver mod, which is the kind of the linchpin in this whole thing. And it's not just the driver mod in terms of the driver having a specific skill set. What we're talking about when we're talking about the driver mod is, again, the understanding of how the process comes together, the understanding of how this whole, how do I put it? The understanding of how all of this comes together to make a complete package. It's your relationship with the shop, an understanding of what the shop's expertise is. What are they good at? How honest is the shop? Can you trust them with your property? These types of things. All of that has to come into play. And another thing, you will find that in this business, and it is a business after all, you get what you pay for. This is one of the rare instances where you can truly see where your money has been spent, like practically literally see where your money's been spent. Do not make the mistake of going cheap. And I don't know how else to say that. What I have seen happen a lot, and this is, and it sucks because I've actually had to turn people away in this situation. Customer comes in, says, I want to do this package, or I want my car to do something, right? You go, okay, well, here's a parts list and here's what it's going to cost. The guy goes, God damn, it's a lot of money. Yeah, it's a lot of money. It's also a lot of work. And what are the results of that? What am I going to get out of it? I don't know. You might get 30 horsepower, 40 horsepower out of it, but it's going to make a huge difference in the way the car runs. Nah, well, I'll go somewhere else. They'll do it for cheaper. See ya. All right, bye. And it's funny that see ya, all right, bye, the look on the face was always the exact same. That look of shock. Like, oh, wait, no, stick around. Stop. Don't leave. Oh, man, please come. I'll take some money off of it. No. Hell no. First of all, I'm not going to cheapen the value of the expertise that built the shop in the first place. And secondly, I know what it really costs to run the shop. I know what it costs to pay my guys. I know what it costs per day for that lift to be occupied. All of these costs have to be taken into account. And, Frank's, green bean stand and automobile emporium is not going to have the same type of overhead or understanding or experience either on racetrack or on the street that other shops will have. So the understanding then has to be that you're not paying for the parts and you're not paying for the labor. You're paying for the expertise and the understanding and the general wherewithal of the shop that is doing the work on your vehicle. You're paying for professionalism. And these are, although not necessarily tangible, they are very valuable and they mean more in the build process than the parts and the labor alone. This is a total situation of, in more than one way, the sum is greater than the whole of its parts, meaning that the package, if it's put together right, will be the top performing package. The labor will be top notch, meaning things are scrutinized as the process is run through the system. That cam specs are vetted and understood and not just thrown out there just because they sounded good. There's reason and understanding behind all of this. So anyway, getting back to the story, more to the point, guy goes out. God damn, this happened so too many times while I was there. Guy goes out, gets the work done somewhere else. And then it gets into this argument. Well, why did we capture the business? Well, we didn't capture the business because the guy didn't want to pay what it was going to cost to get it done. So they find it done somewhere else for a lot cheaper. Guy gets the car done somewhere else super cheap and it's butchered. Nitrous kit not hooked up right. Wiring looks like ass. Nobody went through the process of even taking a look at the thing once it was done. It was rushed in and rushed out of the shop. Doesn't run right. Problems, mismatched hardware. You name it, we've seen it. And I mean, it's been bad in some cases. Like you just don't want to have the conversation. In fact, on a couple of occasions, I had voted to punt the car and the customer because it was cursed, man. I mean, look, I'm not superstitious, far from it. But when you see something come into the shop that looks like Play School put the thing together, you learn pretty quickly what to run away from. And there have been a couple of times, actually, there's actually a couple of folks that I actually did punt, but there were a couple that I wish I would have because the work was so bad, or that had a Hellcat come in. This one actually scared me half to death. Had a Hellcat come in. It was an E85 car, double pulley, so equivalent to a Bravo package. Think something like Racer X's car. Very similar hardware to what that one would have had. In the tune, knock sensor sensitivity, if you're not familiar with knock sensor voltage, it's on a 0 to 5, and voltages are all over the place based on cylinders and proximity to knock sensors and all of that. Knock sensors were all set to 4 volts, which is to say they were completely turned off. This car had like 24 degrees of timing, 25 degrees of timing in it. And I remember I was in the car about to baseline the car, and Alex had done a read file. And so I had strapped the car down and I'm in the car, and actually I was setting up the dyno and setting up for wheel speed. And as I'm setting it up, I get done and he's giving me kind of like one of these looks. I'm like, what's going on? And he just goes, "You're not going to believe what's in this tune." And I'm like, "Well, what?" And I mean, we ended up not doing a baseline on it. I mean, it was like one of these things where we got to tune it down just to do a baseline. We're afraid we're going to blow the thing up on the dyno. And I'm trying to remember it like exactly as it played out, because it was one of those things where, you strap enough cars to the dyno, they all start to kind of blend together. You do enough dyno runs. When you're doing 3, 4, or 5 a day, I mean, they all blend together throughout the course of the day. And add that up over weeks and months and, all of that. So, but this is one of the more memorable ones. And I'm just going, God, thing's going to scatter all over the freaking dyno. I mean, this thing was like a bad tank of E85 from popping a ringland or lifting a head. I mean, it really was that bad. So, and the funny thing is that I'm not, no, we can't. This isn't something that we can, I'm not going to blow this guy's car up on the dyno or run the risk of having an overly aggressive tune. It's just not a good place to start, especially when you're like throwing caution to the wind with knock sensor voltage. So it was really weird. And this particular customer, this is one of these guys that really should never have modded his car, because he had been given unrealistic expectations. It was a shop that had fudged the numbers on a dyno. This is another thing why I hate talking about dyno numbers, because dyno numbers are bullshit and they can be manipulated very easily, even by accident. Okay, I mean, I'm not even talking about like the nefarious, like trying to pull a fast one type of stuff with dyno numbers. I'm talking about you can actually accidentally screw something up on a dyno by setting it up wrong and give funky results. I don't think you could see. Yeah, this chart's going to kind of throw things off, but this is a situation where one of the cars is one that I strapped down and another one is where somebody else had strapped it down. And you can see the difference in the graph and how one ends before another one. And basically what that is that's just the way that it was reading power due to the way that the wheel speed sensors were set up. So it's just weird little things like that that can screw up dyno numbers. That's why I hate talking about dyno numbers. It's a tool, it's a wrench. Does it baseline? What did it pick up over base? That's all anybody really cares about. And where did it pick up? Did it take the power and just move it? Did it come up and over, which is typically the case with Hemis? So anyway, CryptoCast saying, hey guys, Cody saying, drive my Escape EcoBoost from a straight line is scarier than when I had my Corolla. Okay. Catalyst saying, Mr. Mason, what would you say the first definitive year of, what would be, you say is the first definitive year of the muscle car? Defining muscle car, tough to say. I would say the introduction of the V8, 1955, for Chevrolet. You could say that, okay, so that's a V8, but then you've got or I should say the overhead valve V8. 1932 with the flathead Ford would have been considered a bit of a muscle car, although it wouldn't have had that same moniker at the time. Getting into more of a classic era, the 57 DeSoto with the firepower Hemi would have been a sure intro for a muscle car. The 58 Plymouth Belvedere, you'd know it as a 58 Plymouth Fury, like what Christine was with the 350 cubic inch Super Commando 350 dual quad V8 would also find its way into that conversation. It happened before the classic muscle car era. Now, some will say the early 60s, really, that's when the hot rod muscle car, the super stock style car, if you will, really started to come into its own. You get into the 62 Chevy bubble tops with the 409 cubic inch V8, which is it's there's a song written about it. You get into like in 64, 65, 66 with the AC Cobras from Ford. That's obviously as you had the Mustangs coming into favor at that time. The Galaxies were big at that point. And then you had the Hemi in 1964. And then, of course, the Street Hemi in 1966. So it all depends on what your definition of muscle car is. But there were the genesis of it happened clearly in the 50s. And then from there, it was just built upon and built upon and built upon until we got into kind of the the more golden era of the muscle car, which would really start off in like 1965, where you would see the proliferation of 400 or close to 400 cubic inch engines being really more the norm for, B body sized cars. You'd see things like, Chevelles, Galaxies, any of the Belvederes or Cornettes or Savoys or any of those cars. That's really where you would see those engines coming into play. So, the 413 Max Wedge, the 426 Max Wedge from Dodge, leading into the Hemi, but some would even argue the 426 Max Wedge being a better engine just in general for street use. All kinds of stuff will fall into those, but the 300s were, again, that some will argue that the 300s from like 1957, 1958, again, the Belvederes of that same era would be the driving catalyst for that more power. So again, it depends on how you define it, and it depends on the types of cars that you're really looking at. Smoking saying, what's up, B? I got my rear seat delete kit. Time to save 48 pounds. Now, if the driver could lose 48, then I'd be set. I know the feeling there. Cody's saying, so basically don't go cheap and get it right the first time. Yes, very true. And keep in mind, it takes, there's a lot of different ways. You'll always hear in business, you'll hear things like this. And some of them have been mathematically proven. 20% of your business takes up 80% of your time. There's also the 90-10 rule. It follows in exact lockstep with that. 10% of your business takes up 90% of your time. It all basically means the same. But the reality is how much time does it take to get it right? And most of the time, a rush job will take about 15% less time than meticulously going through the job and getting it right and taking your time. So yeah, spend the extra money. If it costs you 10% more, but they're putting 20% more effort into it, it is a better value per dollar. Just keep this in mind. Typically, when you go cheap, by going cheap, the margins in some cases are actually greater. So for the cheaper product, if you go with a quality product with quality labor, you will get a quality, reliable result. Typically, normally. Obviously, mistakes happen. Everybody that I know is human for the most part. And I'm not infallible myself. So I get it. Mistakes are made, roll with it. Stuff happens, hot rod shit, move on. That's the easiest way to get around it. Smoke if I was saying Diamond Star Motor guys back in the day were like, upgrade to 2.5 full exhaust, then it was full 3, then it was full 3.5, then it was side exit. I know, I remember back then very well. Bruce is saying, a bit off topic, is there any truth to the notion that a centrifugal supercharger is basically a belt-driven turbo? I hear that a lot. No, it is a belt-driven turbo. That's specifically what it is, as a matter of fact. And to know why that supercharger exists, I mean, that was so before there was NASA, there was NACA. And the idea was they did all the testing on everything engine-wise and aerodynamics and engineering and all this other stuff. Kind of a go-to resource, if you will. And centrifugal superchargers, in terms of the power that you put into them versus the power that you can extract from them from a engine-driven, in other words, crankshaft-driven supercharger solution, has the highest efficiency when you gear the supercharger and the engine for a specific RPM range. Efficiency has to do with weight, it has to do with power production, and it has to do with fuel consumption at that power level. Turbos being run off of the exhaust are more efficient than the belt-driven supercharger and they have a wider range that they can be used. The only downside to turbos is that the power is not linear. So from your point of view, that power is not linear. It comes up and then it tabletops. That's great for the most part, but if you are looking for a linear power delivery because you don't want all this power at a lower RPM, you want to feather it in, then the centrifugal supercharger is the blower for you. But yes, it is exactly that. The only difference between a Centi blower, centrifugal supercharger, and a turbo is that the centrifugal supercharger will have a significantly more aggressive impeller design. And that's because the centrifugal supercharger is simply not turning at the same RPM as the turbo. So it's got to be able to grab more air for every revolution than the turbo does because it's being spun by the exhaust. By the way, fun fact, typical parasitic loss for a turbocharger is about 10%. Centrifugal supercharger is kind of a rising logarithmic loss chart, but you're looking at, if you're just going to throw a percentage at it, say 20%. And positive displacement is usually around 30%. So that'll give you an idea. Plus positive displacement is the heaviest of all of them. Dwight's asking, what are your thoughts on a comp 112 50211 on a 6.1 stock? I'd have to see the specs, man. I don't know what that cam is off the top of my head. It looks like it's on, I don't know, is that on a 112 LSA? I have no idea what the specs are. So if you post up the specs, I can tell you. Smoking at 5 cent. Upgraded the same parts over and over on my DSM. I like the DSM cars. Smoking at 5 cent. A lot of guys say the first muscle car was the first GTO. It's subjective for sure. Yeah, no, it's not. That's not the first muscle car. That's the first marketed muscle car. But you've got to remember that leading up to 1964, you still had hot rods that were being made. People still wanted fast cars. There just wasn't a name for it. Nobody had a name for it per se. And then, of course, you had the Corvettes, you had people hot rodding this stuff, but they didn't have a name for it. And really, the muscle car moniker, it took on its own meaning, and even the meaning to different people meant different things. And so, muscle car to some guys meant biggest engine in the cheapest car you could put it in. Others, it was the most powerful engine package in whatever package you got it in, whether it was a top of the line GNX or, a Roadrunner with, vinyl floor mats and a column shifter with a Hemi. I mean, it could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And they're all 100% valid. Infidel saying 2020 Challenger Red Eye, is it safe to run headers without a tune? Thanks, make sure your knowledge is priceless. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. You can, but you don't want to. And the reason why you don't want to is you need to be able to tune for the headers. And it's not that you're tuning specifically for the headers necessarily in terms of power production. You run into a couple of problems. Your big problem right off the bat, actually let me just walk you through the problems you're going to run into. Small inconvenient issue is pulse timing. So on any exhaust system, you have we're going to just use my fist here as your exhaust port. The time that it takes that exhaust pulse to go from the exhaust port to your first oxygen sensor, the computer knows what that is. So this thing goes bang, this thing reads something. Bang, this thing reads something. And that pulse goes bang to the oxygen sensor. When you put long tubes on it, now you're moving that thing way over here, right? So then it goes bang, and this thing's waiting to read something, and it doesn't. And then it reads something. So the idea is that you change that and you tell the computer, look, it's a little bit longer now for the pulse to go from here to here. It's minor. It's not a big deal. The twist, and this is where all of the whole conversation goes. Long tube headers, short tube headers, it doesn't matter what they are noisy. And I don't mean like they're blah noisy. They're noisy just in the fact that you can hear you can hear all the firing in the tube itself. And if you ever listen to a car with headers, it's got this distinct sound. Okay. Well, the factory headers, if you will, are insulated, and they're insulated under hood heat is one thing, but they're also insulated for sound. And so they don't, in essence, they don't piss off your knock sensors. Well, when you put headers on the car, those headers are not insulated. And so all this extra racket that's going on that is allowing that uninsulated pipe to just ring like a bell in there, that's the knock sensors are going to pick up on that, and they will start to throw voltage all over the place. So you'll think that you picked up power with these long tubes, but the reality is that long tubes go on, you fire up the car, the knock sensors now are going, holy shit, we got all kinds of things going on that aren't right. So they start pulling all the timing out of it. So now you're just not running any timing with the car. So that's one of the issues that you have. So, I mean, can you run them on your car? Yeah, I guess you could with no tune, but ain't going to run right. And I mean, you're going to be yanking timing all over the place. So, I mean, from a doing the right thing point of view, yes, no, you have to run the tune in the car to deal with the pulse timing, but it it has a lot to do with the knock sensor voltage. So much so, in fact, that when you put long tubes or any shorties really on one of these cars that are not insulated, but long tubes for sure, you've then got to change your knock sensor voltage limits. I mean, you're going to be changing those things to certainly well over 2 volts. And there's some areas where, like in the top of the rev range, normally you'd see only half a volt being the threshold. You're now going to move that to at least 2 volts, 2.5 volts. And that's, again, to quell the knock sensors from yanking a bunch of timing just at cruise. And yes, you are absolutely right. And your understanding of this, if you think that, well, doesn't that mean you're kind of turning off your knock sensors? Man, you're not turning them off, but you are making them look the other way a whole lot, which again gets into some of the argument for and against long tube headers. On a Hellcat, you kind of notice a difference with the 2-inch down low. Not a huge difference really up top, but a little bit better drivability in low boost numbers, like cruise. Same things that you get with a 6.4 shorties versus the long tubes. Better tip-in throttle response, better power, better feel under the curve. You don't get any horsepower out of it. That's not even in the cards, but you do get better drivability out of them. But for your purposes of what you're going to do with it, no, you definitely don't want to do that. Brooklyn saying it's been a while since I've been able to catch a line. Good seeing you, brother. Tobias asking, would porting a 5.7 manifold be worth it? I would say it would, considering the number of 5.7 manifolds that I see. Perfect example of that. I just did one for Dr. Differential, and that one had all kinds of casting flash in the runners. Again, some are better than others. Consider it a supporting modification, and it is really being done more to blueprint that intake manifold to work the way that the engineers designed it to work. I don't like talking about manifolds and manifold porting and all of that from the standpoint of you're going to pick up all this power. Some of them do, some of them don't. I picked up as much as 13 horsepower out of some really funky 6.4 manifolds. But it's not like the car picked up power, I just got back some of the power that it was giving up and picked up like 6 or 8 on top of what a normal car would make. But that was just in that one scenario, and that manifold was in bad shape. So build quality being what it is with these manifolds, it's not outside of the range of normal to see a lot of core shift. It's a 3-piece manifold, so it's like a bologna sandwich. You've got 2 pieces that are sandwiched on top of the middle piece, which houses the mechanism for the short runner actuators and all of that. That whole area can get a little bit wonky, and so going in and cleaning that up can sometimes help, especially the transition into the cylinder head itself. I'll typically open them up a little bit, clean up the ports, get all the casting flash out of them, transition all the seams, and make everything kind of flow well. And then I'll port match the manifold to, like an 84, 85 millimeter throttle body. So all that being said, yeah, it's worth it, but it's worth it as a supporting mod. If you're doing long tubes, a tune, intake manifold, throttle body, camshaft, or anything else really even more invasive, then you need to start looking to do those modifications. Scatpack392 is asking, hey Mason, would you recommend a 1320 Scat Pack converter in a regular Scat Pack instead of a big stall converter? Yeah, I would. I'm not a big fan of big stall converters in a car with a cam and an intake that's designed to make a lot of power down low. You just don't need it. And somebody told me that the 1320 converter is basically the same as a truck converter. So look into that. But anyway, yeah, go with that before you even start messing with any other converters. Hilton Mode's asking, what intake manifold do you recommend for a 5.7 truck? The 6.4 truck manifold. No one in my area does manifold porting to fit my 85 millimeter throttle body. So yeah, the 6.4 truck manifold would probably be the way to go. Obviously you'd need the intake components and everything else, but really good working piece for the truck. Plus, you will need an extension for the short runner actuator, but yeah, a lot of guys have a lot of luck with those manifolds. All the fastest trucks run those. Dwight's saying, oh, on that cam, that one was a 273, 277. Those are advertised numbers, so I'm going to say it's probably like a 220, 228 cam, something along those lines. Be a good cam. Basically, it's kind of run of the mill for a lot of the Hemi cams. They like to stick in that 270, 280 range, 270, 275 range. Anything more than that, and you'll start to see a fairly significant drop off in partial throttle performance, which, I mean, if you know anything about these cars, that's where they shine. I mean, that is the wheelhouse of any of these Hemis, is just how well they perform under partial throttle. And obviously the 6.4s are the king of partial throttle response. Delio's asking, what are your thoughts on mid-muffler deletes on Hellcats? Well, not a huge fan of it. The problem is, well, so here's the thing. Hellcats don't have much of a muffler to begin with. So deleting them doesn't really do a lot, except for make them louder. Now, where guys really get screwed up is they'll do a mid-muffler and they'll do a resonator delete. Now, I've got a reso delete on my car primarily because I just like the way that it looks. Also like the way that it sounds, but I did it more for aesthetics. But because it's an X-pipe, the cars sound like they're shrill sounding. And it's not like a shriek or a cool sound. It just, they don't sound good. It's an off pitch. You know a good sounding exhaust when you hear it, and you will also be able to pinpoint just a shitty sounding exhaust when you hear it. That's what like a full delete would sound like. If it were me, and well, I've done this already, my money was spent on a rear reso delete. In fact, I've got 2 videos that I put out basically walking you through some of the steps on installing that. I've got measurements and tools used and all of that. And it's louder. I mean, it sounds like an aftermarket exhaust. It's not like super loud, and it's also not shrill when you're driving. It just sounds good. The mid muffler delete, again, they're just like a long resonator. The thing is, I just don't, I've heard a couple of them and it just really doesn't do a lot for me. I would actually not mind doing an H-pipe with my car. I may look into doing some clever things with the exhaust, only for sound. It won't make any more power, but it's really more for sound and just making a different tone out of it. The problem is you start playing around with that though, and you get into resonance frequencies, primary, secondary resonances that can really be a pain in the ass. But I love the way H-pipes sound versus X-pipes. Dwight saying, 273, 277 lift is 547, 550 on a 114. Okay, so that's starting to look a lot like, kind of like a stage 2 HRT cam a little bit. 114 isn't bad. Again, I mean, like I say, at 50, you're probably looking at 220-ish on the intake side, probably 223, 225, 226 on the exhaust side, give or take, depending on the lobe shape on that exhaust lobe. Again, not a bad, it would be decent on a 5.7, be a little bit shy for what I'd like to see on a 6.4, but not bad. Summer Night saying, are those manifolds made of plastic? Yeah, it's kind of a polymer. Same idea though. If so, how the hell do they not melt under all that heat? Polymers can handle a ton of heat. Yeah, so don't worry about that. They can handle plenty of heat. Infidel saying, thank you very much for the detailed answer. Happy to, man. Crypto saying, asking, can you share which battery you're using in Revlon? Thanks, I need a battery for my cat. I'm using an Archangel battery. In fact, I've got a couple of videos. If you go to like the product reviews or whatever section, you'll see my review of that battery. I bought that battery when those batteries were like 400 or 450 bucks. I think they're like 800 bucks now. Either way, they're really good batteries. They are it's a lithium battery, lots of cold cranking amps, and I would say saved about 25 pounds or something like that. Great battery, and I would absolutely recommend them, provided you can get your hands on one. Smoking at 5 saying, I don't like the muffler delete. I put vibrant billet resonators in place of my mufflers. Another good way to go. Yeah, without getting into different options and different strategies when going with that mid muffler delete. Yeah, just the delete itself, probably not my my first pick. Callus is asking, why is it that the muscle cars from the 60s rarely got better than a factory rated quarter mile time in the 13s? Was it because of the tires? It was because of the tires. It was because of the fact that they didn't rev very high. It's how they made power. It was the fact that they only had 3-speed transmissions. That they were geared to go. There were street cars, and you can't put 456s in a street car. I mean, believe me when I tell you what. Sierra is a perfect example of this. Sierra's got 410 gears and a fairly tall tire, but it will max out maybe at 100 miles an hour. And that's if you stay in it long enough. It'll get to 95 with no problem, but the next 5 miles an hour is going to be tough because it just runs out of RPM at about 4,500, 4,600 RPM or so. Actually, now with the carburetor readjusted, it actually pulls pretty strong to about 47 now. But that's the idea. Most of the engines back then did not turn that high. I'll give you a perfect example. A 440. 440 is absolutely game over, done by 5,000 RPM. Most of the engines back then were 5,000, at best 5,500, and that was for significant, like what you would consider to be the performance version of whatever contraption you're looking at. The 340 Mopar was marketed as being a 6,000 RPM engine, which it was. You had some other, like the DZ302 from Chevrolet, the Boss 302 from Ford, which were good to about 6,200, maybe 6,400 RPM. But for the most part, unless you're talking about an L88 or a side oiler 427, and a few other outliers, you just were not going to see significant RPM. So even on a slick, and they had slicks back then, between the transmission ratios and the way that those engines made power at lower RPM, you just simply were not going to be able to get the thing to accelerate any harder than what it did. Not to say that it's not an exciting ride. I am here to freaking tell you, by the way, that Sierra will absolutely, it won't necessarily terrify you, but it'll certainly get your attention at speeds, over 80 miles an hour, just if you're playing around with it. So, ask me how I know. But it's that's the reason why. It was just really tough. And it took, and you have to understand, we have, we've had 5-speed automatics forever, but 6-speed, 8-speed, 7-speed in the Mercedes, 9-speed in some cars. So you have this opportunity for all of this torque multiplication, right? So a modern, like your modern Scat Pack, for example, would have the first gear equivalent of like a 60s era muscle car of having like 456 gears. But you have all these gears in that by the time you get into overdrive, it's like if you would have had like 253 gears or something like that, because you can cruise down the highway at 70 miles an hour at 19 or 1800 RPM. So those are the reasons. I mean, even though they were lighter back then too, they just, again, did not have the gear multiplication that we do now. Sovereign's checking in with Doc Diff. Ryan's asking, what is the most wheel horsepower one can expect with full bolt-on without cam or boost Charger RT 5.7? Most wheel horsepower, I mean, it depends on the dyno that you're on, man. I mean, again, this gets back into, what dyno are we talking about? Full bolt-ons on a real generous, and I mean like Santa Claus generous, DynoJet 248, you might see 365, 375 out of that thing. Realistically, without a cam though, most of the ones that I would see would cap out on a Mustang dyno anywhere from 335, 340 to 355. I never saw one go above 360. I'll put it to you that way on that Mustang dyno. So hopefully that helps. Summer's asking, do those manifolds deteriorate or get brittle over time? I don't know. Are we talking about, the polymer manifolds? No, they don't. Not like the old stuff. They're a completely different polymer than that. This guy's saying, thanks for response. You hit the nail on the head about headers being noisy. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Crypto saying, thank you. I appreciate it. Absolutely. Ryan saying, if I didn't go a cam with full bolt-on Charger RT 2020, would it still be beneficial to change out the torque converter? No. Not at all. Dr. Div's checking out. Good night, brother. We'll check with you later, man. Tobias asking, what's the best way to delete the MDS? In the tune, you just turn it off, basically. Sovereign's checking out with Doc Diff. I need to turn on the AC in this place, man. It's actually starting to get muggy around here. What's up with that? Let's see. KC saying, hey, Mason, I refer your show quite a bit to people at car shows. Thank you very much. More people like yourself on YouTube can help a lot of people not get burnt. Thank you. Yeah. Well, that's, believe it or not, one of the reasons why I started the channel. I'm going to turn this AC on. Man, I'm starting to sweat. My bald head's starting to get a little clammy. What the hell was that? Hang on. There we go. Get this thing fired up. All right. No, one of the reasons why I started the channel to begin with was, at least the live shows, is that I kept seeing over and over and over again guys getting burned, and and not just by shops. I mean, a lot of it had to do with parts manufacturers were the other reason why. But thank you very much. I appreciate that. So we're saying, cool. Ryan's saying, what are your thoughts about going E85? I mean, it all depends on what your combination is. If you're naturally aspirated, don't really recommend it unless you are trying to get every ounce of power out of the thing. You'll pick up torque down low. Maybe most of the time you don't pick up any horsepower with it. So there's that. But boosted, it's a mixed bag, man. I mean, it's a tuner's best friend, but when you start to look at it from the aspect of availability, fuel quality, cost, because now you got fuel pumps, bigger injectors, and everything else that you need just to run your stock power with the 85, much less more power. Look, I'll put it to you like this. If you want to make big power with a boosted engine, you've got to go E85. If not, don't worry about it. It sounds neat, but the reality is that there's not a huge benefit. And the reason for that is you're not running enough compression to take advantage of it. You need compression ratio. You can run maybe a little bit more timing, or at least be able to get away with a little bit more timing, but even that isn't always the case. Engines like whatever timing that they like. So unless the engine was designed to run on 87 octane and you're trying to throw timing at it anyway, you can kind of see where I'm going with this without belaying the point. NA, unless you're building like a 16-to-1 engine, it's not really worth it. And if you've got a blower, yeah, it's worth it. But again, there's a cost component to it that you really have to ask yourself, am I going to take advantage of this E85? Look, there's a reason why Revlon is still pump gas and not E85. I can put a tune together. If I converted to E85, stock boost, I'll run 9s with that car. That's kind of a given. But it's the cost and everything that you have to do to get the thing to run on E85 that it's just not worth it. Plus, if I put it on E85 and I run a 989 with it or a 985 with it, if I pulley it up, then I can go 940s or 930s or 920s. So it almost begs the question, like if you're going to go, if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound, right? So why would you stop? I mean, like, why would you limit yourself at that point? Well, we know why, right? I mean, we go back to the kind of the beginning. This kind of brings this thing back to full circle. Should you modify your car? And that's, again, the cost versus benefit for me just isn't there. Besides, I like playing around with pump gas on a stock car or a stock boosted car. It pisses off a lot of pulley cars, and they're not all just Mopars. Cal's asking, what do you folks use upgraded end links for? It's actually not an upgraded end link. It's typically a shorter end link. And what that's doing is it's moving the sway bar out of the way so you can put smaller diameter wheels on the rear. Sovereign's asking about the video about the Toyota creating a hydrogen engine. Yeah, I've seen that. Actually, I've seen that before. And one of the things about hydrogen, when I was a kid, interestingly enough, hydrogen was the fuel of the future. And one of the problems with hydrogen being used as a fuel in internal combustion engines was high NOx values. So yeah, your only particulate, if you will, may be water vapor, which sounds great, but you also have high NOx values. There's still some things that need to be cleaned up in the emissions of those things. But it was a fuel delivery issue. There was a lot of goofy like packaging issues back then. So I knew that it was just a matter of time. We'll see if hydrogen. The problem with here's the funny thing about hydrogen is that you're not using electrolysis to pull hydrogen out of water. What typically happens is that they pull hydrogen out of methane gas, and it's a more energy efficient way to extract hydrogen than it is to generate the electricity by some other means, typically coal or natural gas is being burned. I guess wind or solar could argue with that point, but you kind of see where I'm going with this. So you're already kind of using natural gas as the fuel as you extract that hydrogen. So there's a lot of controversy that surrounds hydrogen as a fuel source as it pertains to its link to fossil fuels. Tobias is saying, God bless. Well, God bless you too. Ryan saying, Charger RT tuned for 89 or 91. I've heard 89 makes more power than 91. 100% false. It just doesn't make much more power than 91 because 91 is basically 89 octane anyway. So, you're not going to get a whole lot out of it. You might get a degree or two of timing, whether you're playing with 89 or 91. I wouldn't get too aggressive either way, and no, you'll be in good shape. 89, in fact, I tuned my old truck on 89 octane, and it ran fine. Made 336 to the rear wheels, and it's on a Mustang dyno, and that's actually what I was learning how to tune on, was that truck on 89. Cal is saying, a little confused with traction control at the track. Do you turn it off? Yes, I do. Also, I noticed that the 1320 has drag traction control, etc. Yeah, just put it in drag mode. You'll be in good shape. But yeah, I turn mine completely off, and when I run the 1320s, I run them just like every other car. We just, tack them up to about $2,000 and stab the throttle at them eat. Ryan's got the flags up. And fellas, with that, I am going to check out because we are now over 2 hours into it. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for hanging out with us tonight. Love each and every one of y'all. Could not do this without you. And with that, if you're going to send it, don't bend it. Keep your shiny side up. Stay safe out there. And we will catch you on the next one. That's a wrap. Adios.